Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Kara McKinney. Do you want to know how bad Bidenomics really is? Well, check this out. Russia's economy is now growing faster than the U.S. and all other top global economies are, according to the International Monetary Fund. And they've been facing the full brunt of Western sanctions, sabotage, and war through the corrupt D.C. puppet state of Ukraine. So what does that say about us? Now, before you counter me, I know the power wartime economies can have. Just check out how World War II finally ended the Great Depression we were suffering from at home at the time. But I think that's a different story than what Russia, an already weak economy, is dealing with. Moscow isn't coming to the rescue of other nations by revving up its manufacturing capacity. It's taking hits by the aforementioned sanctions, sabotage in reference to what happened to the Nord Stream pipeline, and then war targeted at its economy by all the most powerful nations. I don't take this to be some kind of apologia for Mother Russia or something. What I'm trying to drive home here is how weak the U.S. has become under decades of leadership under neoliberal and neoconservative establishment parasites, which has culminated under Biden's puppet reign. In the report that the IMF put out this week, Russia is expected to grow its economy by 3.2% this year, whereas the U.S. is only expected to grow 2.7%. It only gets worse from there as Japan is expected to grow its economy by only 0.9%, the UK by 0.5%, and Germany a sad, measly mere 0.2%. Business Insider explains the surge, quote, "The surge in growth rate has been linked to the effects of high investment and robust private consumption, buoyed by wage growth in a tight labor market, though the IMF said it expects these effects to taper off in 2025 with a growth rate of 1.8%. The forecast is a wake-up call for Western countries that have hoped to throttle Russia's economy with sanctions to make its war in Ukraine unsustainable. Growth at that level would back up Vladimir Putin's claims that Russia's economy has withstood the most dire effects of Western sanctions and trade restrictions. Meanwhile, as foreign companies leave Russia amid the war, Moscow has been accruing funds from fleeing firms, seizing $387 million as of mid-March. In its energy trade, sustained oil and commodity exports to major markets like India and China, alongside Russia's sidestepping of G7 countries' oil price cap, have enabled it to maintain strong energy exports. Russia's resilience against Western sanctions stems largely from its boundless alliance with China. Trade volume between the two countries surged to a record $240 billion last year, fueled in part by Beijing's appetite for essential Russian commodities that have been discounted amid the West's reluctance to trade with Moscow, end quote. And while we push Russia and China closer together despite their pre-existing grievances toward each other, which we should be exploiting, how have Americans fared, though, in this proxy war coming right off the heels of COVID, another massive calamity which robbed everyday Americans and transferred our wealth? Well, we talked a few weeks ago about reports of Americans being forced to eat cereal for dinner, not because they necessarily want to, but because the cost of food has risen so much with inflation. Well, now the National Gardening Association, using numbers derived from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, says that 43% of Americans are growing food at home, up from 33% just 5 years ago in 2019. Now, I'm sure part of that can be accounted for by new viral trends online to escape the big food, big pharma complex, where dangerous chemicals are added to all of our meals. But I'm also just as sure that another driving factor is just how dang expensive everything's become. And again, this is a good trend. People being healthier and more independent is a good thing. But what it says about our economy, though, I think that's a bad thing. Both of those takeaways can coexist together. Our next guest knows all about the dirty tricks our government plays with our money, in which they always seem to come out richer for it and we always seem to come out poorer for it. Joining us now to discuss is Joe Penland, the founder of the grassroots organization Joe from Texas. Joe, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Great. So you're a self-made man, very successful, and your organization is releasing a contract called the Contract from the American People, and it's for presidential candidates. So can you tell our audience what it entails?
Well, what we've done, we've picked out 10 things that we think are extremely important to America today. And obviously, a lot of it is the economy. The most of it is the debt that we're strangling with today, which has a big grip on inflation. And we put that together, and we've kind of patterned this after Newt Gingrich and the contract they had with America in the mid-90s. That worked real well, got him back in, they won the House, and they got a lot of things done with President Clinton. And they balanced the budget 4 times and paid it down twice. Ross Perot had thrown his hat in the ring the election in '92, and that's what got the attention for America to be paying attention to the debt, which was $4 trillion at that time, which everybody thought was unsustainable, especially Ross Perot. It'll be 36 when Biden finishes his first term. That's 9 times what it was when it was over the top at $4 trillion. And that's why we're doing what we're doing today. We're going to pool some votes together. We're crisscrossing America. We're going to get millions of people behind this contract. We're going to sit down with the 3 candidates, or 1 or 2 or 3 that'll listen to us, that'll give us an audience. And if they'll embrace it, we'll try to get those people to vote for them, and maybe we'll sway this election. First time in American history that a group of people, a lot of retired people, but just people that are concerned and suffering. We're going to pool our vote because your vote counts, but we'll put it with 5 or 6 other million and we'll sway this election.
And that's what we need. And, you know, like you said, you're putting your money where your mouth is. Just recently, I saw, I think it was even just last month, you were talking to the former presidential candidate who's now thrown in for President Trump, but Vivek Ramaswamy, talking about these major issues and how especially Bidenomics have been affecting America so poorly. I mean, it went from just last year, right? The Biden White House, they rolled out Bidenomics. That was the term that it was the slogan they were going to campaign on for this election year. But it tanked so bad because so many people, left, right, center, didn't matter. They associate it with being worse off now under Biden than they were under President Trump in his economy. And so the Biden White House is like, no more, we're not going to go with the Bidenomics term anymore, because again, it hasn't been good for anybody. You know, I talked earlier about how Russia, with everything it's facing, that their economy is growing faster than ours right now. But I mean, what does that say about the weakened state that America has been put into, especially with Biden at the helm?
Well, you know, it's very dangerous. You know, we came out of World War II as a superpower. And, you know, you have to have strong economy, you have to have a strong military, your diplomatic, all those things, culture and all that. We led the world in anything and everything. We came out of that war pretty well far as a country that did not get destroyed like Japan or Europe. So we came out #1, and we need to stay that way. You know, my generation, my parents, if they were living, my father would be 122 years old. So that's the greatest generation this country ever had. They fought in the war. They handed us a country in the late 40s and early 50s. We didn't know much money, but we had a lot of respect from the rest of the world. We were the #1 superpower in the world. We don't want to lose that. When we do, we lose our advantage worldwide, and we don't want that to happen. But this interest that we're paying, that's now exceeding what we're paying for our military in a year, which is insane in its own right. But next year, it'll be over $1 trillion. The CBO has already said we'll go $2 trillion a year in the hole for the next 10 years. That's another $20 trillion. Kara, you'll be $56 trillion in the hole in a short 10 years. That's unsustainable. We cannot continue to let this happen, and we can stop it. We just got to get the right people. We got to change what's working, not working in Washington. We have to put somebody there that has the backbone to stand up to the rest of the politicians that because they're scared to do anything. We need to have the man get back in the White House, take this country back over, and save what millions of people have worked and gave their life for us to have a free country.
And that's what we need. You know, the prices are insane. I just got back from my honeymoon just actually a few days ago, maybe 2 days ago or so. But even trying to, you know, save and cut corners and say, okay, let's pick up food at some fast food, and then that'll be $30, $40+ And it's like, well, you might as well have gone out to a restaurant. You go out to a restaurant, now you're spending $50, $60, $70, and just for 2 people. You know, and I'm not talking about getting all the appetizers and fancy drinks and desserts. I mean, trying to, you know, keep your spending at a minimum. You just get your entree, you just get maybe 1 drink, and then that, not an alcoholic beverage, those are more expensive, but maybe a soda, maybe a juice, and same thing, like I said, it's running $50, $60. It's not just that everything costs more these days, but it's that our dollar is worth less than it was, you know, 100 years ago or so. And that's what I think is really scary, puts us in a very dire predicament. Now, you talk about the double standard, right, between the government and us, the American people, when it comes to finances, when it comes to borrowing money and paying money back. We talk about double standards a lot, especially against when it comes to what's happening to President Trump in the legal field. But talk to us financially about this double standard when it comes to us, the American people, who are being robbed through inflation, because again, that's what it is when our money is worth less. But again, that double standard between what we have to do when we take out money and what the government's allowed to be getting away with. Can you explain that for our audience?
Well, absolutely. You know, America, you know, credit's a good thing. If we didn't have credit, America would be very small as an economy. You have to borrow money most of the time for your house or your car or for your business. But the difference between us and the government, we have to pay it back. And we're accountable. We have to turn in financial statements. The banks and the lenders look at us and see if we're credit worthy. The United States doesn't do that. Whatever they borrow, they just add more borrowing to it. We're borrowing money just to pay the interest. Every check the government writes today is a hot check. We're going to be a couple of $1 trillion in the hole when it's all said and done if we extend our borrowing and if people continue to loan money to us. That's outrageous. We hear this thing about the student loans and all that. That's just a ploy to get votes. If you borrow money, no matter what it's for, you need to pay your debts. That's what America's always done. They've been proud to go to work every day, earn a living, bring that home, and share it with their family, and pay their bills and get their home paid for and so forth. The American dream is fading away with Bidenomics. It's a disaster, and we all know it.
That we do, and sometimes it's so abstract, right? When you're talking about 36 trillion and this and all these large figures. And I mean, in the back of our minds, we know that's our taxpayer money. In the back of our minds, we know these debts are going to be paid for by our dollars as well. And we kind of know that, but sometimes it doesn't hit home as hard as, say, inflation does, as we were talking about a moment ago, when you can physically see and physically feel with your own eyes and your own hands and everything else, your dollar and how it's not stretching as far as it used to. So do you think that, before I let you go tonight, do you think what the American people should really keep in mind, especially as election season is coming up in November, is that when we talk about even what seems so abstract, these bills being passed and $1 trillion here and this guy's being paid off and our money is just going everywhere and anywhere except to help us, the American people, that what we should really keep bringing it back to is we individually, we are the ones who are being robbed to fund all these left-wing priorities, that we personally are the ones being robbed. And do you think that's perhaps the framing that we should keep in mind when we talk about inflation, government spending, and the rest?
Absolutely. We need to take a chapter out of Reagan's book. Reagan, when he was running against Carter, he asked America, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And obviously that was no. And everybody today that's awake knows we're not better off today. Interest rate went to unbelievable rates. Housing stopped. It costs people more to buy a car, buy anything. The inflation is off the top of the chart right now. We know that we got a problem down at the border that God knows why are we opening our border and just doing all the foolish things. Anything that you could do to go in the wrong direction, this administration's done it. And they've done it right in the face and telling America, I'm sorry, it's in your face, we're going to do it anyway. That's what I say. If you're not better off today, then you better change your vote this go around. That's the easiest thing to do. Vote with your wallet this time. How well is your wallet now compared to 4 years ago?
No, definitely. Joe, thanks so much for making time for us tonight.